Chapter 31. Surprise Marriage. The two men left before daylight on Thanksgiving morning in order to get the turkey into Mrs. Malone's oven before her hams. They would take Wilson's cart, they told Crispeth and Vanjie, leaving the buggy and Dobbin, the more dependable horse, for them. Young Will went with the men, and the girls were to bring Esau. It was silly to take the dog, Crispeth argued, but she was voted down. Dogs are thankful too, that was Wilson. Then let them have their dog days. A measure of protection, that was Joe. But they weren't afraid. Who isn't? And besides, he's a dear, Vanjie. Crispeth gave in grudgingly, but inside she was amused. It was always like this, with their good-natured and sometimes heated dialogue, after many a detour ending up on Easy Street. But in this instance, Vanjie, though speaking lightly, seemed concerned about something. "It's the dress and young Will," she admitted to Crispeth. "I mean, I'll be among strangers, and I'm supposed to be widowed. What would be right, Chrissy?" Yes, that did present a problem. Bright colors would be inappropriate. Crispeth had misgivings about the implied deception, but there was the baby to think about. They decided on a simple dark cotton dress with white linen collar and cuffs that made Vanjie look like a little girl pilgrim wearing her mother's clothes. But "I look tacky," she said. Would it make her happier if Crispeth wore her black skirt and pleated bosom blouse? It would. "But what about young Will?" she asked Vanjie. The younger girl stopped brushing her hair. "He doesn't like me," and that seemed important. "Young Will's an introspective child," Crispeth told her. "He's had more than his share of hurts, and it takes a while for him to trust others." "He likes you." "I'm his teacher, Vanjie, often the object of a child's first love. Give him time." It was mid-morning when the two of them reached Turnaround Inn. The men stood around an outside fire where a whole pig was roasting. Smoke billowed from every chimney of the big house, and it was easy to imagine the happy bustle of aproned ladies inside. Mrs. Malone would be issuing orders faster than O'Higgins could carry them out, and greeting guests at the same time. But surprisingly to all, neither of them was in sight. They were greeted only by Wolfe at the gate and Ambrose at the door. Crispeth noted with pleasure that the settlers gathered to greet the two of them immediately, as she had promised Vanjie they would. Undoubtedly, Maggie had spread the news, but the girl herself made no move toward them. The others welcomed Vanjie warmly, so she wore a flush of happiness by the time Wilson elbowed his way to her. "Where are our hosts?" Crispeth asked Joe, who was close behind Wilson. "Everybody's wondering," he replied, as he took her basket of food. She had worked late the night before, preparing Boston baked beans and Southern spoon bread. Might as well put a bit of all the cultures together, she had conspired with Vanjie, who watched with more than her usual interest in cooking. Crispeth looked about the front room with appreciation as she hung her and Vanjie's hooded capes in the closet. The Malone children had swung festoons of evergreen mingled with bright sprigs of bittersweet and sweet-smelling rose-hips from the sweet-briars. She wondered what they would wash dishes in for the big crowd when every granite pot and pan available was filled with the last of the purple and bronze chrysanthemums. Was Thanksgiving always so festive and so mysterious? An air of expectancy seemed to hang in the air, to mingle with the smell of rising yeast bread and pumpkin pies. Crispeth felt the sense of security she had felt when this wonderful family had taken her in. The children gathered around her eagerly, all talking at once. Little Jimmy John tugged at her skirt until she scooped him up in her arms. The day was all she had promised Vanjie it would be, with two exceptions. The large crowd, exciting as it was, would probably make it impossible to get in a private word with Mrs. Malone. The other exception was a certain glint she read in Maggie Solomon's green eyes whenever they met her own. Each time the girl spoke with another of the guests, open hand to her mouth as if to guard some secret. Her gaze returned to where Crispeth, Vanjie, Wilson, and Joe were visiting with neighbors. It was plain to see that she was discussing the four of them, and unfavorably. "I'd better offer a hand in the kitchen," Crispeth told Vanjie. "Probably best to break up the foursome for Maggie's benefit." Wilson answered for her sister. "I want Vanjie to meet someone anyway. Young Mrs. Martin's here and is expecting her first. She and you." He turned to Vanjie. "Will want to talk." Crispeth nodded. The Martins were the new but learned couple that Nate had introduced to her that Sunday at the brush arbor. By the time Crispeth was able to push through the crowd, a loud ring of the dinner bell outside drew everybody's attention. "Brother Jonas," someone said, "seems he's about to make an announcement." The circuit rider stepped inside the back door, followed by men and children from out of doors. With a great deal of pomp, he brushed an imaginary bit of lint from his frock coat, stepped onto a rawhide-bottomed chair, cleared his throat importantly, and sang out, "Ladies and gentlemen, by the power vested in me, I give you now the bride and groom." The guests went so wild with cheers, stomping, and hat-waving that Crispeth found herself unable to see the honored couple. "Speech! Speech!" the crowd roared. "Aye, gunnies, and a speech you'll be gettin'." O'Higgin! Impossible! But it was the true O'Higgin, and Mrs. Malone. How could she have known? No, how could she not have known? The Irishman, looking for all the world like the cat who had swallowed the canary, raised his hand for silence. "Aye, gunnies, Miss Molly said yes she did, and this marriage doubled me claim." Mrs. Malone, her usually pale grey eyes shining, took his words in stride. She extended her hand to show a wide gold wedding band and responded, "This shows him to be my wedded husband and father to these children." She motioned them up front. "But," she paused dramatically, "one claim he'll be missin'. I'll be bearin' the name of the little ones." Jonas, still on his perch, called out, "Rightly so. Vows last night united O'Higgin to one Mollynesia Malone, with name rights reserved." "Sure, and cider's a mellowin' in the cellar." "O'Higgin!" His wife's eyes were stern. "Just how mellow is it?" "Now ye be knowin' I'm a man of moderation, not given to strong drink, Miss Molly." "Right, so it's coffee we'll be servin'," but there was a twinkle in her eye. They would make a fine pair, Crispeth knew. There was understanding born of endurance through good times and bad. There was humor and openness. She glanced up to see Joe's eyes studying her face. It seemed only natural that the two of them should smile in understanding. The bell rang again, the signal for dinner. More, so much more than a dinner, of course. It was Thanksgiving, and it was a wedding feast. Crispeth felt a great surge of joy as they moved into the dining room, where the tables groaned with food. Ordinarily, the hostess would have seen that all the guests were served, but today she was the honored guest in her own house. She was to be served first, then O'Higgin, and then, wonder of wonders, the Malone children, who always had to wait for a second table. Her friends would have it no other way. It was all very touching to Crispeth, and she felt a rush of tears when she saw O'Higgin hesitate at the end of the table until his beloved Miss Molly nodded consent. Praise the Lord, there was no longer an empty chair.